I never thought installing a security camera would turn into the most expensive mistake of my HOA president's life. But watching her scratch a key down the side of my brand new Tesla in crystal clear 4K changed everything. My name is Felix Garrison, and I bought my house in Riverside, California about 8 months before everything went sideways. The neighborhood was called Sunset Ridge Estates, one of those cookie-cutter communities where every third house looked identical, and the lawns had to be exactly 2 inches tall or you'd get a violation notice. I was 32, worked remotely as a software engineer, and thought I'd finally made it. The house was a 3-bedroom ranch style with a decent backyard, and the HOA fees seemed reasonable at first. $250 a month for maintaining the common areas, the pool I never used, and apparently the privilege of being harassed by middle-aged women with too much time on their hands. The problem started about 3 months after I moved in. Small things at first. A notice about my trash cans being visible from the street after 6 p.m. A warning that my car was parked at a slight angle in my own driveway. Then came the letter about my lawn being 2.3 inches instead of the required 2 inches. I didn't even know how they measured that, but apparently someone was walking around the neighborhood with a ruler like some kind of grass inspector. That someone was Brenda Mitchell, the HOA president and the biggest pain in my neck I'd ever encountered. Brenda was 53 years old, had short blonde hair that she styled in that aggressive Karen bob, and wore velour tracksuits like it was still 2003. She lived 4 houses down from me in a house that looked exactly like mine, except she'd painted her door an approved shade of colonial blue. Her husband was barely ever home, worked some sales job that kept him traveling, and her kids had moved out years ago. That left Brenda with nothing but time to make everyone else's life miserable. I first met her in person when she knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of a video call but paused it when I saw this woman standing on my porch with a clipboard and an expression that suggested she smelled something rotten. "Felix Garrison?" she asked, not waiting for me to confirm. "I'm Brenda Mitchell, HOA president. We need to discuss your multiple violations." I stood there in my sweatpants and old college t-shirt, completely baffled. "Violations? I got a couple letters, but I thought those were just warnings." "Warnings that you ignored," she snapped, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Your garbage cans have been visible from the street on 3 separate occasions. Your vehicle has been parked improperly, and your lawn maintenance is substandard." "My lawn looks fine," I said, glancing over at the grass that looked identical to everyone else's grass. "And I put the trash cans away as soon as I get home from work." "As soon as you get home isn't good enough. The regulations clearly state that all garbage receptacles must be stored out of sight by 6 p.m. on collection day." She pulled out a stapled packet of papers. "This is your official notice. Continued violations will result in fines of $100 per incident." I took the papers, scanning through what looked like a 40-page document of insane rules. "You've got to be kidding me. $100 for leaving trash cans out. The rules exist for a reason, Mr. Garrison. Property values, aesthetic standards, community pride." She said each phrase like she was reciting from a holy text. "If you don't like it, perhaps you should have read the HOA guidelines before purchasing in Sunset Ridge Estates." I had read them, sort of. Skimmed them, really. They seemed standard enough at the time. I didn't realize I was signing up to live in a dictatorship run by bored suburbanites. After that encounter, I tried to be more careful. I set alarms for bringing in trash cans. I measured my lawn. I parked my car perfectly straight. But Brenda always found something. The wreath on my door was the wrong shade of green. My house numbers needed to be cleaned. I was watering my lawn on the wrong days. It was endless, and I started to realize that she had singled me out. Other houses on the street had visible trash cans sometimes, or cars parked slightly off-center, but I was the one getting letters every week. That's when I decided to install the security camera. It wasn't even about Brenda at first. There had been a few break-ins in the neighboring community, and I wanted to protect my property. I did my research and bought a high-quality system with 3 cameras covering the front yard, driveway, and side of the house. They were small, unobtrusive, and recorded in 4K with night vision. I installed them on a Saturday, mounting them carefully under the eaves where they had good sight lines but weren't obvious unless you were looking for them. 2 days later, Brenda was at my door again. "Those cameras are not approved," she announced before I could even say hello. "Good morning to you too," I said. "What are you talking about, your security cameras? They require HOA approval before installation. Section 12, Paragraph 8 of the Community Guidelines." She was already writing on her clipboard. "You'll need to submit a formal application, pay the $75 review fee, and wait for board approval before they can remain installed." I felt my blood pressure rising. "These are security cameras on my own house. You don't get to approve my security measures." "I absolutely do. This is a planned community with architectural standards. Those cameras are visible from the street and therefore subject to review." She held out another packet of papers. "Application form. Fill it out and submit it to the HOA office within 7 days or face fines." "This is insane." "What if I just leave them up?" Her smile was pure ice. "Then you'll be fined $100 per day until they're removed or approved. Your choice, Mr. Garrison." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with yet another stack of HOA paperwork. I went back inside and immediately started searching California HOA laws. Turns out, the law was actually on my side. California Civil Code Section 4750 specifically prohibited HOAs from restricting security cameras on private property as long as they were for security purposes and not invading neighbors' privacy. My cameras were pointed at my own property, not into anyone else's windows or yards. I printed out the relevant sections of the law and drafted a letter to the HOA, citing the specific code and explaining that my cameras were legally protected. I hand-delivered it to the HOA office, which was actually just a small room in the community center next to the pool. The bored teenager working the desk took my letter and dropped it in a box without even looking at it. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next HOA board meeting was that Thursday evening. I normally avoided them like the plague, but I decided to attend this one since I figured they'd try to make an example of me. The meetings were held in the community center at 7 p.m., and when I arrived, there were maybe 20 other homeowners scattered around the room in folding chairs. Most of them were older, retired folks who actually cared about whether the pool furniture was being replaced this year. Brenda sat at a table at the front with 2 other board members. There was Richard Chen, the treasurer, who was a quiet guy in his 60s who mostly just nodded at whatever Brenda said. And there was Patricia Mendez, the secretary, who was slightly less awful than Brenda but still seemed to enjoy enforcing petty rules. They had a projector set up showing the meeting agenda on the wall. "Let's begin," Brenda said, banging a gavel that seemed completely unnecessary. "First order of business, community landscaping budget." Richard droned on about mulch costs for 15 minutes while I checked my phone. Finally, they got to new business, and Brenda's eyes locked onto me. "We have a situation with one of our residents installing unauthorized surveillance equipment," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. Several heads turned to look at me. Mr. Garrison has installed multiple cameras without board approval, in direct violation of our community guidelines. I stood up. I submitted a letter explaining that California law specifically protects my right to install security cameras on my own property. Civil Code Section 4750. "We received your letter," Brenda said dismissively. "However, our community guidelines supersede state law in matters of aesthetic control." "That's not how laws work," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "State law literally says HOAs cannot prohibit security cameras. You can't just ignore the law because you don't like it." A few people in the audience murmured. I saw some nodding in agreement. "The board will review your case and make a determination," Brenda said. "Until then, the cameras must be removed or you will be fined beginning next Monday. $100 per day. You can't fine me for exercising my legal rights," I shot back. "If you try, I'll fight it. Then you'll also be responsible for the HOA's legal fees when we take you to court," she countered. "I suggest you comply with the rules like everyone else, Mr. Garrison." The meeting moved on to other topics, but I barely heard any of it. I sat there fuming, Googling HOA attorneys on my phone. This was absolutely ridiculous, but I could tell Brenda wasn't going to back down. She'd made this personal. After the meeting ended, a few residents approached me in the parking lot. One was an older man named Tom who lived on the next street over. "Don't let her bully you," he said quietly. "She did the same thing to me about a satellite dish 2 years ago. Cost me $3,000 in legal fees before she finally dropped it." "She can't actually enforce this, can she?" I asked. "The law is pretty clear." "Doesn't matter. She'll drag it out, rack up fines, put a lien on your property. Even if you win eventually, it costs time and money." Tom shook his head. "She gets off on the power trip. Best advice: pick your battles." I drove home angry and frustrated. The cameras stayed up. I wasn't going to let some wannabe dictator tell me I couldn't protect my own property. The following Monday, I got my first fine notice in the mail. $100 per day, 3 cameras, $300 daily. They were claiming each camera was a separate violation. I immediately called an HOA attorney whose number I'd found online. Her name was Jennifer Ramos, and she practiced in Riverside. Her consultation fee was $250 for an hour, which seemed steep, but I was desperate. "You're absolutely in the right," Jennifer said after I explained the situation. "Section 4750 is very clear. The problem is, pursuing this legally will likely cost you between $5,000 and $10,000 in attorney fees, even though you'll probably win." "That's insane," I said. "So I'm just supposed to let them fine me illegally?" "You have options. You can remove the cameras and reapply, playing by their bureaucratic rules even though they can't legally deny you. You can ignore the fines and fight them when they try to collect. Or you can sue the HOA for violating your rights under state law." She paused. "Honestly, the cheapest option is probably to just deal with their application process. Submit the forms, cite the law in your application, and if they deny it, then you have clear grounds for a lawsuit." I hated all of those options, but I went with her advice. I filled out the ridiculous application, attached another copy of the relevant law, and submitted it with my $75 fee. That bought me a temporary reprieve from the daily fines while the board reviewed my application. 3 weeks went by with no response. My cameras kept recording everything around my property. I caught footage of the mail carrier, delivery drivers, neighbors walking their dogs, and Brenda driving past my house at least twice a day. She always slowed down as she passed, craning her neck to stare at my cameras like they personally offended her. Then, on a Wednesday morning in late September, everything changed. I woke up around 8 a.m. and went through my normal routine. Coffee, shower, check emails, settle in for work at my home office. Around 10, I took a break and checked my phone. I had a notification from my security camera system. Motion detected in the driveway at 9:47 a.m. I pulled up the app and watched the clip. My car, a blue Tesla Model 3 that I'd bought just 6 months earlier, was sitting in the driveway. A figure walked into frame from the sidewalk. I recognized her immediately. Brenda Mitchell, wearing her usual velour tracksuit, this one in purple with white sneakers. She looked around, checking to see if anyone was watching, then pulled something out of her pocket. I sat up straighter, my coffee forgotten. She walked right up to the driver's side of my Tesla and dragged what looked like a key down the entire length of the car, from the front fender all the way back to the rear quarter panel. The sound must have been horrific. She stepped back, admired her handiwork for a second, then quickly walked away toward her house. I replayed the video 3 times, my hands shaking with rage. That psychopath had just keyed my car in broad daylight. The damage was going to be thousands of dollars. And she'd done it because of the cameras, because I dared to stand up to her petty tyranny. I immediately downloaded the video file and backed it up to 3 different places: my computer, cloud storage, and a USB drive. Then, I went outside to inspect the damage. The scratch ran the entire length of the car, deep enough that I could feel it with my fingertip. This wasn't just surface damage. This was going to require a full repaint of that entire side panel. I took photos from every angle, making sure to timestamp them. My first instinct was to storm down to her house and confront her, but I forced myself to calm down. I needed to handle this the right way. I went back inside and called the Riverside Police Department's non-emergency line. "Riverside PD, how can I help you?" "I need to report vandalism. Someone keyed my car, and I have video evidence of who did it." The dispatcher took down my information and said an officer would come by within a few hours. While I waited, I called my insurance company and started a claim. Then, I called a Tesla-approved body shop in Riverside for an estimate. They said based on my description, it would probably be between $4,000 and $6,000 to properly repair. Officer Martinez showed up around 1 p.m. He was in his 30s, professional and polite. I walked him through everything: the HOA dispute, the cameras, Brenda's escalating harassment, and finally, the video of her keying my car. We watched the footage on my laptop together. Martinez took notes and asked me to email him the video file. "That's pretty clear evidence," he said. "Vandalism of this amount would be a misdemeanor in California. I'll need to verify the damage estimate, and then I can file charges." He took photos of the car and gave me a case number. "I'll contact Miss Mitchell and get her statement. Based on this video, she'll likely be cited at minimum. Depending on the damage cost, there could be criminal charges." "What happens next?" I asked. "I'll investigate, file a report, and it goes to the DA's office. They decide whether to prosecute. In the meantime, you can pursue this through small claims court for the damages, or your insurance might subrogate against her." After Officer Martinez left, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and anxiety. I had her dead to rights on video, but I also knew this was going to make my life in the neighborhood even more difficult. I didn't care anymore. She'd crossed a line. The next day, I was working in my office when I heard shouting outside. I looked out the window to see Brenda standing in her driveway with Officer Martinez. Even from 4 houses away, I could hear her shrill voice. "This is harassment. He's lying. I never touched his car." I couldn't hear Martinez's response, but I saw him showing her something on his phone, probably the video. Her face went bright red. She shouted something else, and he remained calm, handing her what looked like a citation. She snatched it from him and stormed into her house, slamming the door hard enough that I heard it from my place. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code, I answered. "You son of a bitch," Brenda screamed into my ear. "You set me up. Those cameras are illegal and you're using them to harass me." "I have you on video committing a crime," I said calmly. "The cameras are legal and you just committed vandalism. That's on you. I'll sue you for invasion of privacy. I'll have the HOA take your house. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I think you're the one who didn't know who you were messing with. Maybe don't commit crimes on camera next time." I hung up before she could respond and immediately blocked the number. I expected more fallout, but the next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept checking my cameras obsessively, half expecting Brenda to come back and do something worse. Instead, I got a notice in the mail from the HOA. My camera application had been denied. The stated reason was aesthetic concerns and potential privacy violations. I scanned the denial letter and emailed it to Jennifer Ramos, my attorney. She called me back within an hour. "This is perfect," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "They've just handed you a slam-dunk lawsuit. They denied your application in direct violation of state law, and they did it right after their president was caught on your camera committing a crime. The retaliation angle alone is gold. So what do I do?" I file a lawsuit against the HOA for violating Civil Code Section 4750 and for retaliatory enforcement of HOA rules. We can also add a claim for harassment. And here's the fun part: if we win, which we will, they have to pay your attorney fees. It's built into the statute. How long does this take? Depends on whether they want to fight it. If they're smart, they'll settle quickly. If they're stupid, we go to court and embarrass them. She paused. "Based on everything you've told me, I'm guessing they'll fight it." This Brenda woman sounds like she's not used to losing. I authorized Jennifer to move forward. Within a week, the HOA was served with the lawsuit. I didn't see Brenda at all during that time, but I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that she was telling everyone I was a liar and a troublemaker who was trying to destroy the community. The criminal case was moving forward too. Officer Martinez had submitted his report, and the district attorney's office decided to charge Brenda with misdemeanor vandalism under California Penal Code Section 594. Because the damage was over $400, it was a more serious misdemeanor with potential jail time, though Martinez told me first-time offenders usually got probation and restitution. Brenda hired a lawyer, some guy named David Cross, who apparently specialized in defending petty crimes. I got a letter from him offering to settle the civil damages. He claimed Brenda was willing to pay for repairs to my car if I dropped the criminal charges and the lawsuit against the HOA. I called Jennifer. "Can I even drop criminal charges? I thought the DA prosecutes those." "You can't drop them, no. The state is prosecuting. You can choose not to cooperate, but with video evidence, they don't really need your cooperation." She thought for a moment. "As for the civil settlement, we can negotiate, but I'd advise keeping the HOA lawsuit separate." "That's about your rights, not just the car damage." I told her to respond that I'd accept payment for the car repairs plus a written apology, but the HOA lawsuit was staying. Cross wrote back saying Brenda wouldn't apologize and accused me of extortion. That was rich, coming from someone who'd committed actual vandalism. My insurance ended up covering the repairs minus my deductible, and they went after Brenda for reimbursement through subrogation. The car went into the shop for 2 weeks, and I drove a rental in the meantime. The repair bill came to $5,400. The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Brenda pleaded not guilty at her arraignment in November. Her lawyer tried to get the case dismissed, arguing that the video evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance. The judge wasn't buying it. California law was clear that recording video on your own property wasn't illegal surveillance. The HOA lawsuit was more interesting. The HOA's insurance company got involved and hired a law firm out of Los Angeles. They filed a response claiming that the camera denial was based on legitimate aesthetic concerns, and that the HOA had the right to regulate exterior modifications. Jennifer filed a motion for summary judgment, arguing that state law was unambiguous and the HOA had no legal basis for their denial. While all this legal stuff was grinding forward, life in the neighborhood became increasingly weird. Some neighbors stopped talking to me, clearly siding with Brenda. Others would give me subtle nods or thumbs up when they saw me, supporting my fight against HOA overreach. The neighborhood was basically divided into pro-Brenda and anti-Brenda factions. The December HOA meeting was packed. Word had gotten out about the lawsuit and the criminal charges, and everyone wanted to see the drama. I showed up with Jennifer, who came as my attorney and guest. Brenda looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her hair was messier than usual, and she had dark circles under her eyes. The meeting started with normal business, but it didn't take long before someone raised a hand during open forum. "I'd like to address the lawsuit against the HOA," said a man I recognized from a few streets over. His name was Marcus, and he'd been on the receiving end of Brenda's enforcement campaigns before. "Our insurance premiums are going to go up because of this." "Why did the board deny a legal security camera application?" Brenda's face went red. "The board has the authority to maintain aesthetic standards in the community. Mr. Garrison's cameras are an eyesore and were denied on that basis." "But state law says you can't deny security cameras," another woman chimed in. "I looked it up after I heard about this. Civil Code Section 4750. You can't prohibit them." "The law has exceptions for aesthetic regulations," Patricia Mendez said, reading from a script that had clearly been prepared by their lawyer. Jennifer stood up. "Actually, that's incorrect. The law specifically states that HOAs cannot prohibit security cameras as long as they serve a security purpose and don't invade privacy. There are no exceptions for aesthetics. The statute uses the word shall not, which is mandatory language." "You're not a member of this community," Brenda snapped. "You have no standing to speak here." "I'm an attorney representing a homeowner, and I'm speaking during open forum, which your own rules say is open to residents and their guests," Jennifer replied calmly. "But if you'd like to continue violating your own rules in front of witnesses, please go ahead." The room got very quiet. Richard Chen, the treasurer, looked extremely uncomfortable. He whispered something to Brenda, who waved him off angrily. "This meeting is over," Brenda declared, standing up and grabbing her papers. "We're only 40 minutes in," someone protested. "We haven't even voted on the holiday lighting budget." But Brenda was already walking out. Patricia hurried after her. Richard stayed behind, looking miserable, and tried to continue the meeting without them. It fell apart pretty quickly, and everyone left talking about the drama in the parking lot. Several neighbors approached me. Tom, the older guy who'd warned me about Brenda months ago, shook my hand. "About time someone stood up to her," he said. "She's been making people miserable for years. Most folks just pay the fines or back down because it's easier." "I'm tired of bullies," I said simply. A woman I didn't recognize introduced herself as Linda. "I live over on Maple Court." Brenda sent me violation notices for 2 months straight because my rose bushes were 6 inches over the property line into the common area. She made me dig them up. They were 20 years old. Her voice shook with old anger. I hope you win. The support felt good, but it also highlighted how toxic the HOA had become under Brenda's leadership. This wasn't about community standards anymore. It was about control and punishment. Christmas came and went. I flew back to Ohio to visit my parents for a week, leaving my cameras running. I reviewed the footage when I got back and saw Brenda walking past my house multiple times, always staring at the cameras with pure hatred on her face. She never tried anything, though. She'd learned that lesson. The criminal trial was scheduled for late January. Jennifer told me that the HOA lawsuit would likely be decided before then, since the summary judgment hearing was set for mid-January. She was confident we'd win. The hearing was in Riverside County Superior Court on a rainy Tuesday morning. I took the day off work and met Jennifer outside the courthouse. The HOA's attorneys were there, two guys in expensive suits who looked annoyed to be dealing with what they probably considered a trivial case. Brenda was there too, sitting on a bench in the hallway with her arms crossed, glaring at me. The hearing itself was surprisingly quick. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Hoffman, had clearly read all the briefs. She asked the HOA's attorneys to explain their legal basis for denying the cameras. The lead attorney, a guy named Robert Chen, argued that HOAs had broad authority to regulate aesthetics and that my cameras were visible from the street and therefore subject to review and potential denial. Judge Hoffman interrupted him. Counsel, I've read Civil Code Section 4750. It says homeowner associations shall not prohibit the installation of security cameras. That seems pretty clear. Where's the ambiguity? Your Honor, the statute has to be read in context with the broader authority granted to HOAs under the Davis-Sterling Act, Chen argued. Aesthetic regulations are specifically permitted, except where state law prohibits them, the judge countered. The legislature specifically passed Section 4750 to prevent HOAs from doing exactly what your client did. They denied a security camera application based on aesthetics, which the statute forbids. Jennifer stood up when it was her turn. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. Mr. Garrison installed security cameras on his own property, pointing at his own property. They don't invade anyone's privacy. They serve a legitimate security purpose, as proven by the fact that they captured criminal activity. The HOA denied his application anyway, citing aesthetics in direct violation of state law. We're asking the court to order the HOA to approve the cameras and to award attorney fees as provided for in the statute. What about damages? The judge asked. We're seeking declaratory relief and attorney fees. The cameras are already installed and functioning. Mr. Garrison doesn't need monetary damages, just a court order confirming his right to have the cameras. The judge nodded and looked back at the HOA's attorneys. Anything else? Chen tried a few more arguments, but I could tell the judge wasn't buying any of them. After about 45 minutes, she'd heard enough. I'm granting summary judgment for the plaintiff, Judge Hoffman announced. The HOA violated Civil Code Section 4750 by denying Mr. Garrison's security camera application. The HOA is ordered to approve the cameras immediately. The plaintiff is awarded attorney fees to be determined by a future motion. Is there anything else? Jennifer smiled. No, Your Honor. Thank you. We walked out of the courtroom victorious. In the hallway, Brenda stood up as we passed. This isn't over, she hissed at me. Yeah, it kind of is, I said. You lost. Get over it. Her face turned purple, but Chen, the HOA attorney, put a hand on her shoulder and steered her away before she could say anything else. I heard him talking to her in a low, urgent voice, probably explaining that she needed to shut up before she made things worse. Jennifer and I went to a coffee shop nearby to celebrate. "Now we file for attorney fees," she explained. "I've billed about 18 hours on this case at $300 an hour, so that's $5,400. The HOA has to pay that, plus filing fees and costs." "And the cameras are officially approved," I said, feeling relief wash over me. "Officially approved. If they try anything else, they'll be in contempt of court." The criminal trial for the vandalism charge was 3 weeks later. I had to testify, but it was brief. The prosecutor, a young guy named Daniel Foster from the DA's office, walked me through what happened. I identified Brenda in the courtroom and verified that the video footage was accurate and unedited. Her attorney, tried to cross-examine me about whether I'd manipulated the footage, but I'd brought the original file on a USB drive with metadata showing it hadn't been altered. The video was played for the jury, and you could see several of them wince when they watched Brenda drag the key down my car. It was damning evidence. Cross put Brenda on the stand, and she claimed she was just checking to see if my car had a scratch already and was trying to feel how deep it was. It was the most ridiculous defense I'd ever heard, and the jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for less than 2 hours before coming back with a guilty verdict. Brenda's face went white when the foreman announced it. The judge scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks out. I left the courthouse feeling vindicated but also exhausted. This whole thing had consumed months of my life and thousands of dollars in legal fees, even though the HOA would eventually reimburse most of it. All because one woman couldn't handle someone standing up to her petty authority. Sentencing came in late February. The judge gave Brenda 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay $5,400 in restitution to my insurance company for the repair costs. She also had to take an anger management class, which seemed appropriate. "Miss Mitchell, you held a position of authority in your community," the judge said during sentencing. "You abused that authority to harass a neighbor, and when he stood up for his legal rights, you retaliated by vandalizing his property. This court takes that very seriously. If you violate your probation in any way, you'll be looking at jail time. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said quietly. She looked defeated, shoulders slumped, nothing like the aggressive woman who'd knocked on my door months earlier. The fallout in the HOA was swift. Several homeowners, emboldened by my successful lawsuit, started pushing for Brenda to resign as president. There was a special meeting called in March to vote on her removal. The community center was absolutely packed, standing room only. Tom nominated Linda to replace Brenda as president. Marcus seconded it. Brenda tried to defend herself, claiming I'd orchestrated a campaign against her, and that she'd always acted in the community's best interests. But too many people had their own stories of her harassment and petty enforcement. The vote wasn't even close. Brenda was removed as president by a margin of 63-12. She stood up, grabbed her things, and walked out without saying a word. Patricia Mendez resigned too, saying she didn't want to be part of a witch hunt. Richard Chen stayed on as treasurer, mostly because nobody else wanted the job. Linda took over as president and immediately started reforming how the HOA operated. She created an appeals process for violations. She reduced the daily fine amounts. She made sure the board actually followed California HOA law instead of making up their own rules. It was night and day compared to Brenda's reign. I got my attorney fees from the HOA in April, $5,400 that covered most of what I'd paid Jennifer. My insurance company got their restitution from Brenda. The though I heard through the gossip chain that she was on a payment plan because she couldn't afford to pay it all at once. Brenda kept a low profile after that. I'd see her occasionally driving past, but she never looked my way anymore. Her husband was home more often, and I wondered if the criminal conviction and public humiliation had caused problems in their marriage. I didn't feel bad for her. She'd brought it all on herself. My cameras stayed up, of course. They'd never captured anything as dramatic as Brenda keying my car, but they gave me peace of mind. I'd also become something of a folk hero in the neighborhood. People would stop me while I was getting my mail or walking to my car to thank me for standing up to the HOA tyranny. A few others installed their own security cameras, and nobody from the HOA said a word about it. Life slowly returned to normal. I focused on my work, started dating someone I'd met through a friend, and tried to just be a regular homeowner. The HOA sent out their monthly newsletters, but now they were about actual community events instead of violation notices and fine schedules. Linda organized neighborhood barbecues and a Halloween party. It actually started to feel like a community instead of a police state. The 1-year anniversary of installing my cameras came and went. I thought about everything that had happened, how one decision to protect my property had led to months of legal battles, a criminal trial, and the complete upheaval of my HOA. Part of me wished I'd just taken the cameras down and avoided all the hassle. But a bigger part of me was glad I'd stood my ground. I'd learned a lot about California HOA law, more than I ever wanted to know. I'd learned that bullies often back down when you actually fight back, even if the fight is expensive and exhausting. I'd learned that communities can change when people get tired of being pushed around. And I'd learned that sometimes the evidence you need is right there in crystal clear 4K, recorded by the very thing someone tried to force you to remove. One evening in late summer, about 14 months after the whole thing started, I was sitting on my back patio with my girlfriend Sarah when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my camera system. Motion detected in the driveway. I pulled up the app, half expecting to see a delivery driver or a neighbor. Instead, I saw Brenda's car pulling into my driveway. My stomach dropped. What now? I watched on my phone as Brenda got out of her car. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. She walked up to my front door and knocked. Sarah looked at me with concern. "Is that her?" she asked. "Yeah, stay here. I'll see what she wants." I went to the front door and opened it, keeping the security screen closed between us. "What do you want, Brenda?" She held up her hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, I stepped outside, leaving the door open behind me in case I needed to retreat quickly. "Make it fast." Brenda took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize for everything. The harassment, the violations, keying your car, all of it. I've been working with my therapist, and one of my goals is to make amends with people I've hurt." I stood there, genuinely surprised. "Okay, I'm listening." I was in a bad place in my life. My kids had moved away, my husband was never home, and I felt like I had no purpose. The HOA gave me something to do, but I took it way too far. I used it to feel important, to have power over something when everything else felt out of control. She looked down at her feet. "That's not an excuse. What I did was wrong. You were just trying to protect your home, and I made your life hell because my ego couldn't handle someone disagreeing with me." "You committed a crime," I said. "You caused thousands of dollars in damage to my car." "I know, and I'm paying for it, literally and figuratively. I have a criminal record now. I lost the respect of my neighbors. My husband almost left me." Her voice cracked. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and I'm trying to be better." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. All I saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "It doesn't undo what happened, but I appreciate it," she nodded. "That's all I wanted to say. I'll leave you alone now." She turned to go back to her car, then paused. "For what it's worth, you were right. About the cameras, about the law, about all of it, I was wrong." She got in her car and drove away. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Sarah came to the door. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," she apologized. I shook my head. "I did not see that coming." "You believe her?" "I think so. She seemed genuinely sorry." I thought about it. "Doesn't mean I trust her, but maybe she's actually trying to change." We went back to the patio, and I thought about redemption and consequences and whether people really could change. Brenda had faced real repercussions for her actions. A criminal conviction, community shame, financial penalties, and the loss of her little kingdom. Maybe that was enough to actually make her reflect on her behavior. Or maybe she was just going through the motions to complete her probation requirements. Time would tell. Either way, my cameras stayed up. They were legal, they were approved, and they'd proven their worth beyond any doubt. The whole ordeal had been stressful and expensive, but I'd won every fight. The law had been on my side. The truth had been on my side. And most importantly, I hadn't backed down when a bully tried to intimidate me. Life in Sunset Ridge Estates continued. The HOA under Linda's leadership was actually functional and reasonable. Neighbors looked out for each other instead of reporting each other for minor violations. The community pool got renovated. We had block parties. It was starting to feel like the neighborhood I'd hoped for when I bought my house. I kept the video of Brenda keying my car saved in multiple locations. Not because I planned to use it again, but as a reminder. A reminder that standing up for yourself matters. That evidence matters. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be bullied, even when it's difficult and expensive and exhausting. My Tesla got repaired and looked good as new. The scratch was gone, buffed and painted away like it had never happened. But I remembered it. And every time I saw those security cameras under my eaves, I remembered why they were there and what they'd captured. Karen complained about my camera. It caught her keying my car. And now she'd paid for it in every way possible, financially, legally, and socially. Justice had been served, recorded in perfect 4K clarity. As it turned out, sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, but simply making sure the truth comes to light. I learned that California Civil Code Section 4750 was more than just a statute. It was a shield against petty tyranny. I learned that HOAs could be reformed when enough people demanded change. And I learned that sometimes the best investment you can make is in the tools that protect your home and prove the truth. The cameras stayed up, watching over my property day and night. They never caught anything as dramatic as that September morning again, and that was just fine with me. They'd already done their job, protecting not just my property but my rights as a homeowner. Brenda had tried to take those rights away, and she'd paid the price for it. In the end, it wasn't about victory or revenge. It was about standing firm when someone tried to abuse their authority, about knowing your rights and defending them, and about the value of evidence when someone tries to deny reality. My cameras had turned. He said, she said dispute into an open and shut case. They'd exposed a petty tyrant and helped reform a toxic HOA. Some neighbors asked me for advice on what security systems to buy. Others asked about HOA law and their rights as homeowners. I became an accidental expert on both topics, happy to share what I'd learned through months of legal battles and research. If my experience could help someone else avoid getting pushed around, then all the stress and expense was worth it. Brenda kept her distance after that night. She apologized. I'd see her around occasionally, at the grocery store or driving through the neighborhood, but we never spoke again. She'd fulfilled her community service hours by picking up trash along the highway, wearing an orange vest while cars drove past. I heard she'd sold her house and was moving to Arizona to be closer to one of her kids. A fresh start, away from the community where everyone knew what she'd done. I didn't feel satisfaction at her leaving. I didn't feel much of anything except relief that the drama was finally over. The neighborhood moved on. The HOA functioned properly. Life returned to the peaceful suburban existence I wanted all along. My cameras kept recording, silent witnesses to the mundane daily activities of a California suburb. Package deliveries, morning commutes, dog walkers, kids riding bikes. Normal life, exactly as it should be. And if anyone ever tried to mess with my property again, well, I had 3 cameras in 4K ready to capture every second of it. That was the real lesson from everything that happened. Not that people are terrible or that HOAs are evil or that you should always fight back against authority. The lesson was simpler. Protect yourself, know your rights, and never let anyone bully you into giving up those rights. Whether it's a power-hungry HOA president or anyone else who thinks they can push you around, standing firm matters. My house in Sunset Ridge Estates was finally the peaceful home I'd wanted when I bought it. The lawn was maintained to perfectly reasonable standards. The trash cans went out on schedule and came back in promptly. My car sat in the driveway, unblemished and protected by multiple cameras, and the HOA left me alone, focused on actual community building instead of petty enforcement. Sometimes Sarah would joke about the cameras, calling them my Karen detectors. And in a way, she was right. They detected a Karen in action and provided irrefutable proof of her crime. They protected my rights and ultimately led to positive change in the entire community. Not bad for a few $100s of security equipment and the willingness to stand up for what was right. The legal bills were all paid. The car was fixed. The HOA was reformed. Brenda was gone. And my security cameras kept watching, day after day, night after night, making sure that my little piece of suburban California stayed safe and secure. Everything had worked out exactly as it should, with justice served and lessons learned all around. I never regretted installing those cameras. They were the best investment I ever made.